Hello and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about how to measure your strength in your ACL recovery. So this is going to be really important for you, I think, regardless of who you are in your own ACL journey, for understanding where you're at from a strength point of view. We know strength underpins all athletic performance, injury prevention, and if you can keep track of this over time and understand it, you'll have a much better understanding of how to manage your body and manage the risk of injury kind of going forward long term. So I'm going to talk you through four tests. So there's gym-based strength testing. Um, this is obviously quite accessible for everybody. We're going to be looking at leg strength tests, which looks at global leg strength, so multiple joints working together, the hips, the knees, the ankles, isolated quad and hamstring strength tests. So we know that global leg strength can show your overall strength, but it doesn't show the individual muscles, and the glutes can compensate, so we can isolate the quads and the hamstrings to get insight into what those muscle groups are doing. And a really simple isometric calf test that I use, I'm gonna talk you through. So it's important to understand that these are max strength tests and it's not capacity testing. So, for example, if you've come across any testing before, like the Melbourne ACL protocol, that's got a lot of capacity testing in. It's got the leg press as a strength test, but it doesn't cover isolated quad, hamstring, and calf testing from a max strength point of view. It's got capacity tests like your heel raise, your sit stand, your hamstring bridges, which are all high reps for kind of body weight. We're looking at how much force you can produce with a max strength test. So I'll talk you through the difference in them. So why is it important to be able to do this? So I think firstly it's about setting a standard in your rehab. If you know what targets you need to hit and you have a criteria and we can work out what your strength is, then it means that you're not guessing. You have a target to work towards, and once you hit it, you can then move to the next stage. Obviously, gym-based tests are accessible for everybody. If you recover from ACL injury and you go to a gym, you're going to have access to these pieces of equipment. So it's something that you can do that you can do regularly. It can help you monitor your progress. If you have another injury further down the line, you know what your strength standards were, and you can work towards getting back to them. Or if you have a period off for whatever reason, and you can go and assess your strength, and then you realize that you're below the targets, you know that that's a priority to go and build yourself back up. So it's a very cheap option where you can regularly monitor and check your progress and your recovery. And it just gives you that insight into your relative strength and your symmetry between legs. So if you're doing a particular strength exercise and you know that you're lifting a lighter weight on your operated leg than your other leg, well, you know that you need to bridge that gap and how far off you are versus whether you're really close or you kind of miles away. And again, that will dictate what the priority is in your recovery. If the gap's quite big, you know that you're probably going to need to focus more on strength and building muscle. Obviously, the limitations, standardization between machines can be an issue. I've used three different leg extension machines in the past couple of years, and thankfully they're all very close in terms of the numbers between the machines. So I think I use a Techno Gym, a Live Fitness, and a Pure Gym one. They're all giving me this roughly the same number within about 5%. So obviously that there's going to be differences between machines, and we need to take that into account. So it's an estimation of strength, and it's really good for rehab in terms of guiding your decision making, and you can see the numbers increasing on the machine that you're using. But it's not that accurate for measuring relative strength. There's going to be some leeway, whereas it is good for looking at symmetry. So you know that if you can lift 50 kilogram on a leg extension on one leg and 40 on the other, well, you know that that's an 80% symmetry regardless because the test is the same test on both legs. Obviously, in terms of like an actual sign off to return to sport, you don't want to be using gym-based testing to return to sport. That's where you would need to go and invest in actual performance testing, force plates, peak force, etc., Bidex, whatever you've got access to. That's where that use comes in. Obviously, you're not going to go and pay for that every 6 weeks, but if you know what weight you're lifting in the gym, as long as you're in the same gym using the same bit of equipment, at the same time you go and get these tests. Let's say you're lifting 50 kg on a leg extension, and then you've had your peak force test on your quad, you can then go, well, I know I was lifting 50 kg at the time I had that test. If I keep my strength at 50 kg, chances are I'm going to be hitting that same standard in my peak force testing. And then you have that information long term. As if you drop below that, then you might obviously think, well, my peak force is going to be less. So if you go above it, then obviously you're getting stronger. Will that increase the peak force? Most probably. So just some useful definitions to go through. So a 1 rep max test, your 1RM, how much weight you can lift for 1 rep, which means if you did 2 reps, you'd fail on the second one. Now, these aren't very practical to do, particularly if you're by yourself. They're a bit easier on machines than, say, doing a squat where you might need spotters, but still it's a difficult test to do. So I can talk you through how we do other tests to predict our 1 rep max. Absolute strength, so that's the amount of force or weight you can lift, which is independent of your size, whether you're a 100 kilogram male or a 50 kilogram female. If 100 kilogram male is, say, squatting 120 kilograms and the female squatting 60, the absolute strength of the male is obviously higher because they're lifting a heavier weight. Whereas relative strength, how strong you are for your size, let's take an example of a 50 kilogram female doing a leg extension of 40 kilogram versus a 100 kilogram male doing 75 kilogram. Obviously, the male's lifting a heavier weight, but for relative strength as a percentage of the body weight, the female is at 80%, whereas the male is at 75%. So she is relatively stronger than he is. And this is why doing relative strength tests is important because you don't want to be setting the same standard for a 50 kilogram female versus a 100 kilogram male because it's just not going to be fair and a true representation of where they're actually at. Obviously, symmetry, you're comparing the operated leg to the or the injured leg to the non-operated or non-injured leg. So sometimes if your operated leg is stronger, you might get it to say over 100% symmetry. If it's obviously less, which for the most part it will be, it might be 60, 70, 80% symmetry, and we're trying to bridge that gap and get them as even as possible. So symmetry is helpful for that reason, but symmetry alone is not a good marker. So for example, you might have somebody that is at 80% symmetry, let's say this 50 kilogram female, she's doing let's say 20 kilograms on a leg extension and 16 kilograms on her operated leg versus 20 kilograms on a non-operated leg. That works out at, I think it's 80% symmetry. Whereas, let's say the male is 100 kilograms on his operated leg and 50 kilograms on his non-operated leg, sorry, and 50 kilograms on his operated leg. He's at 50% symmetry, but in actual fact, he's lifting 5 times the amount of weight on his good leg and much more weight on his operated leg, maybe 3 times roughly. So that's where symmetry falls short. We have to use both relative strength and symmetry in our calculations. So a 5 rep max and a 10 rep max, these are things that we can do to predict our 1 rep max. So it's essentially 5 reps or 10 reps to failure. Now it's not always going to be a 5 or a 10 rep max. It might end up being 6 reps or it might end up being 7 or 8. That's fine. We can talk through how we're going to calculate anyway. So as an example, if you go to do 5 rep max and you've used a weight on a leg extension as 57.5, you end up doing 7 reps, it will predict that your 1 rep max is 69 kg. Now you can find this calculator online, just Google it, 1 rep max calculator. This is the first one that comes up, which is quite straightforward. You literally just put the weight that you've lifted and the repetitions that you've done, and it will give you this nice graph. So it can also calculate how many reps you can do for a lower weight as well. So if you wanted to do, and if we know that your 1 rep max is 69 kilograms and you're doing 10 reps, 3 lots of 10 in an exercise, we can actually predict that it'd be roughly around 52 kilograms that you need to do that for. Or if you want to leave a few left in the tank, it might be just a little bit below that. So if with 2 reps in reserve, you would pick, say, 48 kilograms. So I don't think these videos frame very well, so I'm just gonna roll it through. I think it's better if I scroll it. So on this, you can see I've got 3 20 kg plates either side for a single leg press, which is 120 kg. The plate weight, so if it was empty, the plates weren't on it, the weight of the machine, the empty plate would be 32 kg, so it's 152 kg in total. Right leg is, I did 8 reps for, failed on the 8th. No, I did 8, sorry. And then I wouldn't have been able to do 9. Obviously, this is a bit harder because you can't really fail on it because you'll end up folding yourself in half, which is not recommended. I did 8 reps on both sides. So as I add them up, predicted 1 rep max is 188 kilograms. My body weight is 78 kg at the time. So 188 divided by 78 is 241% body weight and a symmetry of 100%. So I was doing the same weight and reps on both sides. It's fairly straightforward. So you can see when I put in 152 on this calculator for 8 reps, it predicts my 1 rep max. I mean, technically it's 189, but for the point of maths. And then you can see how you could probably do 180 for 2 reps, 169 for 4, etc. Leg extension. So as an example, 60 kg for 5 reps would predict my 1 rep max at 74 kg or 74.5. Relative strength. So my body weight is 78 kg. That works out at 96% body weight. Just remember as well to make it accurate and consistent each time to record all your pin positions. So where the pad is, where the seat is, and where the so how far up your shin it is and the angle of the pad. So there's 3 points on this machine I make a note of, and I always make sure that the set are the same, so it's kind of standardized. And the same with the hamstring curl. There's going to be a few different points that you position the pad. Obviously, the higher up your leg you put it, you're gonna get a different strength value because you probably have to lift a different weight. So again, on this 35 kg for 5 reps, predicted my 1 rep max was 39.4. Being 78 kilograms, that was 50% of my body weight. If I've not got access to a seated curl in my gym, which is a bit annoying, most gyms do have a seated curl. If you are doing a seated curl and you've only got access to a seated curl, it's normally a bit easier to lift a heavier weight on a seated curl. So I normally have a plus 10% rule. So I might expect that I can do 45 kg on a seated curl for the same amount of reps, which means I just need to adjust that bar, which I'll talk you through at the end anyway. 6 second isometric calf hold. So again, I'll just roll through. So this is 6 seconds holding a weight on a leg press. So you can see quite static there. My calf isn't moving, my ankle isn't moving. I've got that on 160 kilograms. Whereas when I do my right one, if you look, my heel drops. Just can't hold that weight. I think I did this about 4 months post-surgery where my calf was still a bit weaker. So you can see it from this alternate view as well. Easy to hold on the left side. Try on the right side, heel just drops, just can't hold that weight. So you put the weight through the ball of your foot. No calculator needed for this one because you're not converting it. So 160 kg on my left, 130 kg on my right, which created a symmetry of value of 81%, and relative strength value of 206% body weight on my left and 167% on my right. So just thought it'd be useful to give you some criteria that I use for return to run, return to sport. If this is all you have access to, like I say, return to sport, you probably want to get more formal testing anyway. But return to run, we can certainly use gym-based testing to guide our decision making. Because you're not always going to just go and spend hundreds of pounds on getting the formal testing if you're doing it in the gym and you've got access to this anyway. That, like I say, that's more for return to might be something you use more for return to sport further down the line, depending on your budget and what you've got access to. So leg press is 150%, leg extension ideally greater than 50%, hamstring curl 30% on the prone curl, 40% on the seated, calf ISO test 125%. So remember, this is just purely from a strength point of view. There's other tests you need to pass. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you can run. You got your capacity tests, your hop tests, so you need to also pass them. So you can be strong but not very good at hopping on one leg and absorbing impact, which means that you're higher risk of aggravating things when you run. You return to sport, ideally leg press above 180%, leg extension 70 to 100% depending on your sport, where you were before surgery, etc. If you're playing a sport that requires higher speed running like football or rugby, and you need to be relatively strong anyway, you might be looking at closer to the 100. If it's maybe a recreational court sport that you're playing, it might be closer to the 70% value that we're looking at. Hamstring curl, again, 40 to 6% depending on the machine you've got and your goals. Calf ISO test return to sport 150 to 175%. So you can see in the previous test actually from the calf one, I was at 167%, which is arguably strong enough for return to sport, but my symmetry was 81%. So it's not good for me to have a calf that is at 81% compared to the other one. So I want to get it up to that standard. So although it's relatively strong, that's where symmetry then becomes more important because let's say you don't want a leg that is 80% or around 80% of the strength of the other one. So that comes to the end of that. Hopefully that was useful for you, gives you some insight. Obviously go away, give it a practice. If you've got any questions below, obviously drop the comments there. I'd be happy to try and answer those. You can hit the subscribe button. I'll be putting out more videos like this, which will hopefully teach you certain concepts and topics around your ACL recovery. Obviously appreciate the following. If you are interested in more formalised help and implementing this in getting a proper structure, a proper plan, sort of taking away that guesswork for you, where I can do a lot of this for you, then obviously DM me at @RickWilliams_ACL coach on Instagram. Be happy to chat, see if I can help.